Hi, everyone, and welcome again to a special edition of the Neil Haley Show. And I'm with Larry Forletta of Forletta Investigative Services. Larry, thanks for stopping by. Last week, we really learned about why it's important to hire a private investigator, but now we're going to go into some other things that you do. And there's sometimes situations where people have to call a private investigator they might not think they would ever have to do, correct? But
Yeah.
it does happen, especially when you're talking about kids and potentially having drug problems, and that you want to be able to verify if this is true or not true, if the story is right or wrong, and what you kind of do. So explain that to us.
Well, thanks, Neil. And I think today is I think it's a special show because I think we're going to talk about overdose deaths and fentanyl, and we can go into that in a lot more detail.
Yes.
But yes, so what a private investigator's role in overdose death cases is really to be an advocate for the family that are struggling with the loss of a child or a loved one. And so I've been involved in several of them, and it's a very difficult situation to be in, but you're also there to help the family get through their issues with the loss of their child. So we do a couple things. As the advocate for the family support, we also try to work with the authorities in helping and find the people that are responsible who provided the drugs to that particular individual, which resulted in their death. And it's a very difficult thing to deal with, and a very difficult case as well.
So drug overdoses definitely happen, heroin, fentanyl. How difficult is that when families call you about this?
Well, it's extremely difficult because they're leaning on the authorities to help them get through it. Sometimes the authorities don't go far enough, and for a variety of reasons, because of maybe some restrictions, overworked, overburdened, and it's really a difficult situation. And sometimes they could miss the boat, and that's where we come in. To reinforce that, to work with the family, and to work with the authorities. I had one particular case where a mother tried to see, some of the top people in law enforcement in Allegheny County. We eventually got her there, but it took, an extensive amount of work with myself, and I brought in an associate to get her where she wanted to be.
Wow. And I think that process, why is it important in a private investigator? Let's just say someone died of fentanyl or heroin or certain just drug-related situation happens. When you do the research yourself instead of hiring a private investigator, what happens in that situation?
Well, a lot of times they're looking for help, and that's why they do a lot of the research stuff on their own. And sometimes they don't believe that the authorities are moving fast enough. But there's always, mitigating circumstances about why sometimes the authorities don't move fast enough, at least, in the family's mind, that, they think that, there should be a lot more done, things of that nature. And so what I try to do is help them understand the process of our criminal justice system to make them better understand, what we can do, what the limitations are. And in addition to that, when I meet with the families, they provide me with a lot of information on potential witnesses in the case who are, maybe the friends of their child or drug addicts themselves. So it actually comes into a full circle, but that's how we try to assist, that family in need.
Yeah, definitely. And that process has got to be so heart-wrenching for the family and stuff like that. And how do you investigate and finally find out how it happens? Is the process of going and investigating where they bought the drugs from?
Right. And who they were with at the last moment, who may have supplied them the drugs. Now, the authorities in a lot of occasions are already doing that. But yeah, we follow up. We take a look at who the family provides, the witnesses' names. We go and talk to them. And if we develop any additional information, which may lead to an arrest. We always work with the authorities, contact them, and advise them what we have. And I'm not just a private investigator in that sense. I'm a former federal law enforcement agent. So when it comes to drug overdose and drug investigations, that's one of my expertise. And so I'll know whether the authorities are doing a proper investigation or not.
And that's an interesting thing, because the process just shows that why you hire a private investigator unless they've been in law enforcement before, especially yourself, because you've investigated drug overdoses your whole entire career, not just as a private investigator.
Right. Well, we've investigated a lot of cases that resulted in somebody's death with overdose cases. Now, it's come to light now that the law has changed here in the state of Pennsylvania, but before they didn't have a statute with delivery, which resulted in somebody's death. So now that's kind of changed, which makes it a serious crime, a felony. And a lot of the law enforcement agencies who've been educated now are treating a lot of the overdose death cases as homicides. And I know several years ago, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Pittsburgh had a big push to get a lot of the cases taken for federal prosecution. And now you're starting to see the local and state authorities pick up on that.
Definitely. And that's for sure. And the process. So you go and investigate, you figure out the different things. How do you make sure, because you're not a police officer, that you're able to keep a good low profile in doing an investigation like that?
Well, it all depends. But if we have to go and interview witnesses, if they're cooperative witnesses, then that becomes a much easier task. But if they're not cooperative witnesses, then we have to go and actually approach them and try talking to them and see whether we can extract any information from them. Sometimes, it depends. Sometimes they might be less or more reluctant to talk to the authorities than maybe talk to a private investigator, because maybe they don't correlate the two. And so sometimes that could be beneficial in a lot of cases.
Now, you talked about drug overdose. One of the things I started thinking about is, what about kids that commit suicide? And then the parents want to investigate why. What was the reasons? Was there serious cyberbullying or excess bullying? Because a lot of times police officers, unless they hear the bullying is a really severe situation where there was a death threat, they don't really look into it anymore further.
Yeah, it just depends on the set of circumstances in the case. Now, I have been involved in some suicide cases as a private investigator, and because the family wanted other options and wanted to look at it maybe a little bit more in depth than what they thought how the authorities handled it. But I have handled some suicide cases as well. But, I think what we're facing here now is a whole new destruction, I call it, and poisoning of America with fentanyl. In Allegheny County alone, I mean, it's just out of control.
Wow.
And you can see, I think Allegheny County had over 600 some fentanyl overdose death cases. And, fentanyl is probably somewhere between 80 to 100 times more powerful than morphine. So, and even fentanyl has been used over the years, for a variety of reasons, for operations, for pain, and a whole lot of other things. But now it's being clandestinely manufactured. And so, I had a special show on my podcast called The Poisoning of America. And one of my guests, who's a retired DEA agent, he and I discussed the seriousness of fentanyl and how it is affecting this country. This is an epidemic in proportions that we've never seen, because at one time, we looked at heroin, but now we're dealing with something even more dangerous than heroin, because we're only talking about a minuscule amount, no bigger maybe than your little pinky. That
and then
could kill you.
why do kids take fentanyl? Or it's laced with fentanyl?
It's laced with fentanyl. A lot of them don't know.
What kind of drugs are they taking that are laced with fentanyl?
Well, it could be pills, could be mixed with into heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine. And so the reason behind that is a lot of the users don't know that they're ingesting a fatal dose of fentanyl. No. They think that they're ingesting maybe heroin or cocaine or methamphetamine. So what the traffickers are doing, the drug traffickers, I'll say, they're mixing the fentanyl now. It's to add what we call bulk to the product, which means it stretches out their product to make more money. And and so usually what happens is that's what they're all about, is to make money. And so if they can make more money on their product, then they can stretch that product out. And so, what we're seeing now is a real devastating effect. And I thought that, when we talked earlier, I wanted to dedicate this show to the overdose deaths and the fentanyl poisoning, what's happening here in Pennsylvania, in Allegheny County alone. It's southwestern Pennsylvania. Today I wore my Steelers shirt because I think it's important for all of us collectively that we have to get people's attention to this I mean, this is, when I'm talking about a serious problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a serious problem.
So why would drug dealers put fentanyl in? They want to keep getting their people to buy it.
Well, as I mentioned, they're trying to increase their revenue. So if they're able to make, let's say, a kilogram of heroin into another, or a kilogram and a half mixed in with fentanyl, that's more money in their pocket. So, and so what we're seeing happen is it's an adulterant now. With heroin at one time, they would add quinine. With cocaine, there's different powders that they would use to mix it up to bulk up their product. But now this is probably one of the most deadliest, situations we've been in. I can tell you, in 1999, I was still working the streets as a DEA agent. And yeah, we had fentanyl on the street. Some 20 years later, and this is coming from a report that the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette did, that it's 50 times higher in the death rate across the United States. And, when you begin to look at this, you're wondering what is going on. I can tell you what's going on, and a lot of retired DEA agents can tell you what's going on. And where fentanyl's coming from? It's coming from Mexico. It's coming via China to Mexico into the United States.
So it's going to be worse now than it was before oh gosh.
Absolutely, it's worse now because there's more access to this. And I have a message for everybody out there. Get on the politicians. Tell them to stop playing political games on our border. That's at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. We need rigid enforcement on our border. We need a border wall. We need to get this thing under control. Right now, it's out of control. The CBP, the Customs Border Patrol people, they're tied up dealing with all these migrants coming into this country. And I'm not here to make a political statement. I'm here to make a statement that's going to help people save some lives, because what drug agents do all over this country is to save lives. One less overdose death case to a family is you can never, do more than that. And that is something that affects all of us.
What you're saying, Larry, that is the control board, as you talk about, but for people out there, the dangers of doing these drugs is huge. Just like heroin now, you got to watch out for everything. If you're trying to, if someone's listening saying, I still do some illegal drugs, there's a big chance of their life.
Well, yeah, and that's the problem too. And some of these, even fentanyl affects law enforcement. It's so dangerous now for law enforcement. Some of these traffickers have been known to put fentanyl powder on their clothing, and there goes a law enforcement officer patting them down, and next thing you know, they're overdosing. So it's really dangerous in what's happening in our streets with fentanyl. We've had to deal with COVID And now, COVID looks like it's improving, but we kind of ignored the fentanyl problem. And this fentanyl problem is not going away. We have to do something.
Why don't we see much coverage on drug overdose deaths every day?
I mean, our fentanyl issue is really out of control at this point.
I wish that they did more coverage. Okay, where can we find information on you, Larry, and more info? Where we go?
Well, you can go to my website at www.fcisllc.com. I would encourage any family to go to our website. They can call us. I'll be happy to talk to them. And if there's something that I can do to help them or even steer them in the right direction, please call me.
Awesome. Again, great topic. Great that you're honoring the family of lost kids with fentanyl. We need to stop as soon as possible. And thank you for taking that on the Haley Show. So thanks again. Appreciate it. All right, guys.